Good late Thursday or late Friday, meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center right now, giving a look at the infrared satellite imagery there as we look down towards south of Cuba, south of Jamaica there. We're watching some very cold cloud tops as we do have a nasty system in toward that region that's trying to organize. So really need to be cognizant of that as we're looking ahead in toward the timeline here. We're just going to be paying attention to this here as we look ahead and toward the, days ahead because we're expecting rapid strengthening here, with this. Sadly, that rapid intensification is likely as we look down there. So just be kind of paying attention, as this could get very bad for folks in and around Jamaica, for instance, also toward Haiti there possibly, and Cuba. As we're going to have just so much tropical moisture and a very volatile storm system in terms of those winds. We're expecting, you see these 4 icons on here indicating a Category 4 hurricane. Right now, a tropical storm is pretty low in terms of the winds, 45 miles an hour. So as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them. But we're expecting that, strengthening to take off here as we look ahead into toward the days to come. A potentially catastrophic threat for folks down there. It's just going to be so bad. If you have any friends and family that are able to evacuate from these areas, we're talking especially about Jamaica, make sure they're doing so as quick as possible before, things are too late in the timeline where, things, like airports shut down, it may be too late to get out. So, you don't want to be stuck there if you can help it. You think about what happened in Puerto Rico with Maria. You think about some of these other tragedies here that we've seen. You think about Andrew there in South Florida and that wind. You think about Michael and toward the Panhandle. You think about the flooding from Harvey in Houston. And you could have the wind and the rain impacts. We could have feet of rain there in Jamaica. Just an absolute tragedy could be in the making. It hasn't, the storm is technically a tropical storm right now, so maybe we'll get lucky. I don't think that we will. Maybe somehow it won't strengthen like the models are showing, but anticipating a catastrophic scenario there for areas there around Jamaica. You have Haiti, Cuba, that area is looking just so bad. Toward the area, the Bahamas needs to watch as well there as we look ahead in toward the timeline. So yeah, just got to be paying attention here as we're tracking things overall. This is not a good situation at all here as we are giving you guys the very latest on things. I know there's a serious threat here for these poor folks as we're looking out there. I know Puerto Rico is probably going to miss the worst of this, but I'm expecting rain warning out there in the vicinity right now, so maybe some wind enhancement there, water spout potential coming on in towards some of those areas down that way. So that's a cause for concern, obviously. This is just going to be a serious situation, though, down there with soon to be, as we look ahead here over the weekend, Hurricane Melissa, right now, tropical storm Melissa, but going to be very bad. It's not a U.S. direct threat right now. It doesn't look like Puerto Rico some impacts and the current risk here. We'll be watching, the overall pattern, and then we will need to watch up in the northeast here. It's too early to know because this is just 5 days out, going from here, that red square, if you can see it here, and that is a problem. Because it's going to cause this flooding range of epic proportions, sadly, down there toward like Jamaica and Haiti and Cuba there and the like. So even then, we have to see how the steering currents are in 5 days. 5 days from now, maybe not even hitting, into Cuba directly, that they'd be getting some impacts. And then the Bahamas up toward the northeast, eventually in the U.S., we might have to watch them maybe further out, maybe out, further in toward the Atlantic here. It's kind of, more uncertain here in terms of that overall forecast right now. As we look at some of the model guidance, you see it weakening some too. So that's the thing. It's going to be in a really prime environment to cause devastation down here. Further up north, maybe not as much. You see all these different models showing, the indications of a major hurricane hitting Jamaica. Some of this, could be happening here, maybe even late Sunday, according to some of these Cat 4 hurricane, maybe even early Sunday. Some of this is speeding it up some, which, well, it gives you less time to prepare, slightly less to rain, but still feet of rain likelihood here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. This is Jamaica here, folks. You think about areas like Kingston, Jamaica. You think about areas there in that region that could be completely devastated. This could be, a storm that brings feet of rainfall. Those winds, gusts maybe over 150 miles an hour based on the forecast here. This could be a tragedy here, a global tragedy here as we're looking at things, as we're looking toward Jamaica. So, awful, awful situation for them. Please, if you know anybody over there, I know it's, not again part of the U.S. like Puerto Rico is, but if you happen to know anybody over there, just make sure that they know this is coming. This is going to be very bad, it would seem. And this could be, a hurricane like, they haven't seen maybe since the 80s with Gilbert. Possibly 1986, I think it was, with Hurricane Gilbert came across there. And it was a very bad situation. 1988, I beg your pardon. But, very bad situation there as we look at things, as we track them there in toward that vicinity. So this could be, a huge, huge problem. It reminds you of the Bahamas with Dorian, maybe, the type of devastation we could see here. Even if the winds don't get as high, then, you still have the flooding. This could be, just astronomical flooding because of how slow this is going to sit. The winds might not be quite as high as Dorian. We're not quite at the peak of hurricane season, but these conditions, you see 3s and 4s here, very bad, slow moving. It's not like it's just going to get right through there. It's going to take its time and dump rain. The the eye is going to be, a system here where we have that, convection there that just keeps dumping many inches of rain an hour, able to still get the fuel from the Atlantic Ocean surrounding it. So this is not a good situation. Very concerned for Jamaica. It's not part of the U.S. though. We're not turning logo red, but if it was, we would have already done that, obviously. But that doesn't mean this isn't going to be a catastrophe. We're very concerned about Jamaica. In the meteorology community, we're expecting a hurricane like maybe Gilbert in '88. There again, this is very bad news for Jamaica. Cuba, eastern Cuba, gonna have big problems maybe around Guantanamo Bay. You also have there over toward Haiti there, gonna have all that torrential rain. Maybe some of the Dominican Republic having problems too there with some of these torrential flooding downpours based on what I'm seeing on infrared. Though if it gets more organized, it may, kind of, as I put the wind radii on here, kind of confine that further over more so, but still that moisture, even that moisture being drawn up into Puerto Rico and the overall meteorological pattern. So, there's some causes for concern here, obviously. I know we also have some other weather stories to get to on the national level as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them. Let me go ahead and show you the Doppler perspective here in Oklahoma. Excuse me. We see a thunderstorm warning over there right now for portions of Grady and McLean counties. This is indicative here of the potential for $0.5 so I'd say on 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts until 2:15 a.m. Central Time. So yeah, this is South of Norman in the Oklahoma University area there right now. But it's been a rough, even in there in parts of Oklahoma and continuing here into the overnight. So that is a cause for concern out there. And as we look ahead in toward the timeline here, I know we'll have to be looking ahead as we get out there in toward parts of Texas on that Friday here, and all the high school football games, and on Friday night. Well, instead we could have some areas with a tornado threat there from Abilene to San Antonio, especially in that yellow. Lubbock, Dallas, Houston on the edge of the bigger risk here at this point. Some of that risk spreading across toward Houston and further east into Louisiana on Saturday, maybe even a nocturnal threat possibly toward the Sabine Valley there. So gonna have to watch that as we watch the overall scenario. We see San Antonio on that Friday, Austin, the state capital, obviously, College Station right on the edge, and still though the biggest risk, Waco, Abilene, San Angelo, a lot of areas there you have getting closer toward, Fort Stockton there. Midland, not quite as high of a risk up there, but still not out of the woods for some isolated tornadic activity. You see the overall slight risk there in yellow, the tornado risk there, the hail risk, your wind risk. So that's kind of the storyline as we're looking there. And I'll go ahead and take some things off real quick. And let me put on the model guidance the HRRR. We'll go ahead and kind of pull some of this on in here that afternoon on that Friday, and then we'll kind of be taking you along here. You see some of this convection right in time, unfortunately, in some of these areas for high school football, even, in the nocturnal time frame there, the overnight hours of Friday night and Saturday, there could be problems in Texas there too. So, gonna have some concerns on our hands. I'll take this out just for a second. I want to jump this back a little bit and go to the longer range of this so I can go out a little bit further so we can kind of watch the progression. This is like here around 4 o'clock Central, 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Central, so 8 p.m. Central time. You can see here looking there toward areas of South Texas there. You see areas like Pumpville, San Angelo, up through Abilene. High school football could be impacted. Granbury there, even getting closer toward the DFW Metroplex here. It's not out of the question they could have some storms coming in before the games are over with. And, you think about games there, in North Texas. You think about all the different counties like Tarrant County and Dallas County there. As we're looking at things, just kind of trying to give you guys a, big update here on things as the situation does progress there. Just trying to give you guys updates here on things because it's so important to do that as just checking some high school football schedules in Texas. Okay, I was trying to see one of the high schools there. They actually played on Thursday night, the one where Goddard High School there, where FSU backup quarterback Kevin Sperry went his senior year there, Denton, Texas. They played on that Thursday. I was going to see if they had some issues there, but looks like they played at Little Elm and won in that contest. So they're not playing again Halloween night. I know Bradford's off Halloween night. They're playing tonight here for our local weather, but as we go ahead and look toward parts of Oklahoma here, you can kind of see some convection that can impact high school football. I mean, they're toward the Red River and up to the north there even. We'll have to be watching, lightning if nothing else. But some of these storms could be severe, even isolated tornadic, producers. That's a big problem there for high school football. So we have to be very mindful of that on that, on that level. But as we go ahead and get local here, no rain expected for our high school games Friday night. I have dry on there for Bradford senior night and district championship game against Santa Fe, here in Stark at David Hurst Stadium. So that's something to look forward to. It's cool right now here locally. 50 Keystone as of that, 2 o'clock hour if you're watching live. 49 Tallahassee, rural area east of Stark. My thermometer, it's reading, we're more out there in the country. You have less concrete. We're down to 44 degrees here right now, folks. More trees, less concrete, and we're down to 44 degrees here. So that tells you the story, when you're in a city, you have the lights more so, things are warmer. We're out in the country, cooler when you have the calmer winds, but winds are going to start picking on up here as we look ahead in the timeline. That's going to be more of a concern with fire danger, especially, that happens more during the daytime anyway in this pattern, but gonna have some concerns even at night with some higher winds. I know there's some fire concerns that we have to get to, but it will make things, a little bit cool with the light jacket weather being, the storyline for that Bradford game Friday night. But let's talk about Melissa, very dangerous, expected to ultimately be hurricane, major hurricane Melissa. As we go into a weekend, that's always concerning when you go into a weekend. You have, a threat so, significant like this one. Technically, though, right now it's a low-end tropical storm, but we're expecting a high-end major hurricane to develop over the weekend, really. Major hurricane headed for Jamaica. Could cause devastation there in some areas of Jamaica, Haiti, and or Cuba, but, really, really, really concerned there about Jamaica. There's a high level of concern as we're looking and as we're tracking things there. In the overall pattern, it's expected to be a tragedy here as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them here with the overall scenario. So, we have to be very mindful. We have to be very cognizant of the situation here just, an awful, awful situation expected for Jamaica, especially. Just going to be so bad for them. Going to, change that island, there forever. It would seem that, area there, just awful, awful, awful for them. Is the forecast. Maybe somehow this won't strengthen as much, but even then, tropical storms are lower and hurricanes that move slow can dump so much moisture, even if it's not, as high with the winds and landslides can be all over the place there. We're talking about feet of rain. We're talking about maybe 2 feet of rain or something like that, around there. A possibility for Jamaica, plus wind to 150. That's the forecast right now, folks. I'm not trying to overhype this. This is very bad. I mean, it could honestly be a little worse than that with the rain. But that's kind. I mean, based on some of the models, to be quite honest. I mean, I've seen worse than that in some of the models and what I'm even saying. So yeah, that's not a good thing. That's very bad news for those poor folks down there. As we're looking, I'm just gonna look at one of the Euro runs here. Yes, so on 17, 27 inches. Eastern Cuba showing over a foot as well, and even in parts of Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Western Haiti, Southern Dominican Republic, some big problems here as well with the flooding rains of a foot or more. So this is very bad news here. Very bad news for these folks. And if you know anybody down there, give them a heads up somehow, some way. And this could be, especially for Jamaica, a life-changing hurricane, a worst-case scenario. I know a lot of hyperbole here, but as we're looking at things, but we really want to make sure, people are, acknowledging just how bad this is going to be. Hurricane watch, tropical storm warning for portions of Haiti, for Jamaica. Again, Jamaica, this could be, a global tragedy there for those folks in Jamaica. This is very, very bad news for these folks there. As we're tracking things here, evacuate Jamaica now, if possible. This is a deadly storm. You got to take, as many precautions as possible as we go ahead and look here with the names. We're not expecting no Florida threat. We said we couldn't completely rule it out the other day. I'm ruling it out at this point from any direct impacts, rip currents, things like that. You have to watch the coastal impacts with the pattern with the pressures, involve high pressure, low pressure, and the like. But we're ruling out direct impacts from Melissa in North Florida. And I would say even Central Florida, South Florida, the Keys. If something really changed and this really meandered, I wouldn't completely rule it out because of climatology. I don't think that's going to happen at this point, though. As we look out, and then I would still be watching the Northeast and that area there because we've had storms like Sandy that sometimes, looks like 2012 we had around Halloween. It's almost the exact same time of year. We had a pattern that not really the models were picking up very much on a pattern there where things would kind of, be that impact toward the continental U.S. And then all of a sudden, European model, I know they've been showing some of this, and then all the models got on board eventually, and it was a catastrophe there up in the Northeast, New Jersey, and that vicinity there was Sandy. It was technically extratropical when it hit, but it was a low pressure, that was a historic weather maker. I mean, nowadays they've changed the rules since then that they'll keep hurricane warnings in play for a storm system, even if it's not technically a hurricane anymore. That was, worse than like some of the other hurricanes that have hit up there. One of the worst weather makers ever. They had snow out toward the west, I think in West Virginia, I want to say, though. On the other side of that low pressure, it was such an odd storm system. So I don't want to rule it out further up. But yeah, North Florida, we're going to be okay. No direct impact from Melissa. I can rule that out. Same for South Georgia here. That's what you want to hear locally as we're going into the weekend. No local direct impacts from those. As we are looking here at the overall meteorology. I know probably some folks do call it a superstorm with Sandy, and it's one of those where, yeah, I guess you could kind of call it that because it was so bad, so historic. A lot of times there's other, you don't want to use terms like that if they're not technically, technically it was like extratropical Sandy, but yeah, it was a horrible low pressure in terms of just how deep it was and how catastrophe filled it was up there. Nestor, Olga, Pablo, Rebecca, Sebastian, Tanya, Van, and Wendy, the last names on the list here. I don't think we're going to use them all up here. I know if we did, we'd go to another name list, but I don't think we're going to get further than these. You may not even get, to the end of this here, but just remain alert. It's possible we still get a couple more. We had Nestor hit Florida there in 2019. That was, something really the biggest storyline out of that. That's more memorable than anything. I know we had some coastal flooding in the Panhandle, Big Bend, but we had a tornado there in Polk County. That was a problem on a Friday night. And then as we look at tropical climatology, you can see here end of November the chances go lower, but you got to still think about storms like Kate. You got to think about Nicole. I know, as we kind of look at things, as we track things here, Ada there in 2020 as well. So Nicole 22, Ada there in the Greek alphabet in 2020. We just had a slew of names in that terrible year with COVID as well. And then, just so many hurricanes in the U.S. Left and right. And then 85 with Kate. And then I know one thing I looked at that was interesting, because I wasn't around in 85, but I went to the climatology recently, Tallahassee. So you're thinking, well, maybe it's just been hot so much, and then all of a sudden you get Kate and it cools down right after. Well, no, the storyline was we actually had some cool weather before Kate, and it was warming up, and then we had it. So even if we get the cool weather and the fronts in here some, doesn't mean the tropical threat's completely over. I mean, it definitely helps with the maximum strength, maybe instead of a Cat 5 in the Gulf. It's not possible anymore because of water temperature, but you can still have problems even after some fronts come through. So we're going to see some cooler weather coming up, some severe threats, in terms of the national picture we've been talking about. The stronger storms maybe locally here Sunday night and Monday. And, even if we get, the cooler air in here, that doesn't mean the tropical threat's completely over. It does start to reduce the overall risk there. I know Ada was one that really got chewed up by the meteorological pattern as it got further north here and really fell apart. It was a big flood maker. South Florida, North Florida didn't do a whole bunch in 2020, as we were looking at it up here. But a drought monitor, extreme drought still. We need the rain, folks. We really, really, really need the rain very badly. We got some the other day and it really didn't make much of a dent. So it kept this pretty much steady state here. And, sometimes in these periods here, if we're not getting the precip, this is going to get worse and worse here. So there's a lot of concern. That's an extreme drought. Almost as bad as it gets. Tallahassee overlord, Monticello and Jasper there. Madison's in there. You have Stark under the moderate drought right now. This one didn't really change from last week because we did get that rain. So the thing is, if you get flooding rains, you have problems. If you don't get enough rain, well, you also have problems here. And we just need, we need enough rain here. We can't just, all of a sudden, get 20 inches. That's very, very bad. But, a weak tropical storm that produced a few inches here and there would be good. Sure, and that'd be helpful. But sometimes this time of year you start having fronts. If you get drier fronts and you get the wind with them, that's a problem. But the wetter fronts, well, then you can get severe weather. You want to get some. I mean, what we had the other day was somewhat helpful. I would have honestly wished, I thought it was going to be maybe a little bit more helpful than this. This is pretty scary. But some areas got 3/4 of an inch, like around Stark, give or take, and it didn't really do anything with the drought. And a lot of weeks it may get even less than that in terms of the precip numbers here. So that is concerning. But as we go ahead and look here, you can see around Stark, we're seeing 1/4 inch expected next 7 days. You see Tallahassee a little bit more, though, maybe an inch or so up there, and same in South Florida, with some spots, but in other spots would be 1/2 inch there, more widespread the storyline. So, yeah, there's someone here that's better than nothing. You see all that rain, Bahamas, the scope eventually of our system, Melissa, very dangerous one that name probably get retired and never get used again because of just how volatile, that storm system's expected to be. We may get very retired from that nonetheless too because of what happened in Texas from the remnants of that, and indirectly, I mean, it was direct, but it was just partially the reasoning behind that flooding there, after it already officially dissipated days before it caused flooding in the Texas Hill Country on July 4th morning and all those fatalities. But we weren't really tracking. It was depressing when it hit Mexico, and it just, the spin had stayed there and merged with another system, and then the models didn't do a great job on it. And we had just dozens and dozens of folks lose their life there on that July 4th morning. A terrible tragedy in the Texas Hill Country. But you can see here, Western North Carolina, a good bit of rain. Got to be careful there. I know there's been a wildfire threat there because of all the trees that are down still because of Helene last year. Carter.com/radar. Keep an eye on that interactive look at things we're not on. Oklahoma City there. You see down to the Texas, Oklahoma border, the Red River. You see some rainfall there. You see Lake Charles up toward Alexandria and the Monroe and Ruston, Louisiana. A good bit of rain. So, of course, Houston's in there down to Ward areas there. Of course, Beaumont's in there too, but then you have a Victoria in there. So just watching things and tracking them. Georgia Drought Monitor. Yeah, it's a big yikes with this. This is not good, folks. This is very concerning as we get into some, periods. It's not like we're going to get the afternoon storms to help us here. We're way down with the deficit in terms of the rainfall here, folks. I mean, some of these areas have just a huge, huge hole for the year. It's supposed to have way more rain for the year than we've gotten. We haven't had a tropical system really, direct impact. Haven't had that for sure here in 2025. And not that we want that, but a weak one can help us out if it's not too bad. Gives us just beneficial rain. What we are not seeing that here. It's not a good picture here with the drought. I mean, this is probably going to catch up to us somehow, some way here with some problems. And, unfortunately, talking about wildfires and the like. So, obviously, you've got to be careful, like outdoor burning. Some areas have burn bans, obviously. That is something where you got to be extraordinarily careful because fires can have erratic behavior in this type of weather. There's very significant concern. You see Bainbridge, you see Thomasville, you see Valdosta there, you see up toward Moultrie area. This is bad news with this drought monitor, extreme drought here, folks. These fires, they have erratic behavior, cigarette butts. If they start a fire, well, if something happens, let's say, unfortunately, home or something, gets damaged or destroyed, you're the one responsible. That can be a crime, that can be something where you are in some big trouble, obviously, in terms of, I believe the case out there with the California wildfires, that is something that could end up being charged, and let me just double check this because it is something legal. So I need to double check something here on that before I get into this too much more. But just check here, make sure. I think I know what the storyline is with this, but just gotta make sure I get this right. Yeah, the Justice Department there, Department of Justice sending out the report that the guy arrested there, he's a Florida man arrested in California. And just trying to double check something on here. I'm just trying to make sure I get this right. I'm not sure on that case, but I know in other past cases, and some of folks have been recommended the death penalty for wildfires that are, like this. So just looking back at previous cases, at least some of these can be, death penalty type of situations. Jury can convict, and if it's something, just really terrible, death penalty can be recommended here by the courts. So that's something you got to be very aware of here. If you do something wrong, you see a severe drought there around Waycross and the like. So as we go ahead and move along here, you can see looking toward the Bradford High School forecast here for this Friday. You can see here middle 60s dry, mostly clear, breezy to windy. Just some light jacket weather here. The story, the Santa Fe Raiders at the Bradford Tornadoes. So that's an exciting one. It's a district championship. Obviously, as we're looking at things, it's also a situation here where it's senior night. An exciting game there. But it's going to be a little cool, a little on the nippy side. So just be prepared accordingly with all that. So as we go ahead and look there at fog safety tips, some of our area could have that concern. So just slow down and give yourself extra time to reach your destination. Make sure your vehicle is as visible as possible to other vehicles by using your low beam headlights, and leave plenty of room between you and the vehicle in front of you. So again, we're just gonna go ahead, and continue to watch all of that. You gotta be always careful. Obviously, if you get fog and smoke, that's a big problem. It's a very big problem. You gotta be very aware of that here. because that can lead to a situation like in Payne's Prairie, you know, we had on 75 years ago with that terrible tragedy. As we go ahead and see that 7-day forecast there, you can see dry conditions on this Friday. Rain chances go up some, though. We need the rain. We'll take every little bit we can get, and we don't want the severe weather with it. Not a huge chance of that. Maybe a few strong storms, you know, kind of like last time with that. Maybe we'll squeeze out more rain. We got lucky to get as much as we did here around Stark, and it went down so quick. We need the rain very badly. Some areas even need it more, though. You know, around Tallahassee and then the southwest, south central Georgia, there's a lot of concern. As you see here, 80s there for the highs. We'll cool down some. You see 20% chance of rain Tuesday and Wednesday there. 10% on that Thursday. 51 there Thursday morning. So that's going to be nippy, and only 71 there for the highs. Yeah, it's not like it's going to be, you know, something where it's going to be that cloudy. It's just, you know, we're going to be below average here with the temperature. So we'll take that. We'll definitely take that here as we're looking at things. And as we're tracking them, even though it seems like it would, it doesn't necessarily preclude wildfires, though, even that cool here as we're watching things. So, and as we get freezes here, you know, we got to be careful, because that's going to be, we're not getting the rain. Now, sometimes when you get down there, if you get, you know, wet cold fronts, then that can help. But afterward, you know, with some of the moisture content and the soil moisture. But if you're not getting the wet weather here, and then you're getting freezes, that's just going to be even more of a concern with dry grass there and the like. And that could be a big problem. So, got to be prepared for that. Got to do a mitigation there with, you know, the forestry and the like. Prepare for that. Make sure you don't have issues, you know, with things that are vulnerabilities. You got to take care of them as you go ahead and just continue here to look at this. So you can see here, as we're giving you guys the very latest, we're just going to continue to watch things here with the overall meteorological pattern here. We're very concerned, you know, instead of too little rain like up here, it's going to be way, way, way too much rain down toward Jamaica there. I know. Thoughts and prayers down there. Just terrible, terrible stuff as we're looking that way. I know there are things like high school football to enjoy, college football, FSU and Florida off this week, Jacksonville off this weekend. So that's, you know, all those teams have to regroup, those three. Tampa's playing against New Orleans, I think it is, on Sunday there. Let me double check where that game is. That game, the Tampa game, is going to be there. It's going to be in New Orleans. It'll be inside. So that's kind of storyline with all of that. So the weather shouldn't be impacting that. But there could be some, you know, as we're looking there in the pattern. I'll check a forecast real quick here. Could be some lingering moisture outside, especially to the east. But not something that we're just, you know, really concerned with in terms of that. I will say there's going to be a tornado threat at Houston to Alexandria and western New Orleans on that Saturday. Does LSU have a home game Saturday? Let me check. How about Tulane for that matter? Probably LSU. Probably too late for Tulane, I would think. Just off the top of my head. Is LSU, are they playing this week though? They're not in the top 25 anymore, so. Or, well, I guess they still are in the top 25. Okay. Well, that's interesting. I don't know if they should be. But anyway, they are, I guess, still in the top 25, aren't they? As we're looking and as we're tracking things, they're 7:30 game at home in Texas A&M. Let me check the timeline on that. That's a pretty big game then in the Southeastern Conference. Could be, you know, a trap game for Texas A&M a little bit there. As we're looking and as we're tracking things. I know some of these models trying to get the latest on things. Could be a close call there on Baton Rouge then. Looking at some of these models, there could be some issues here Saturday evening with the things are speeding up like what some of the models are showing. Goodness, that's one model I'm looking at here. It's kind of a little concerning here with some of this, squall line in there with some tornado threat. Maybe just to the west as the game's going, but there could be some rain, some lightning around there, so they might have a delay. Baton Rouge Saturday night for that one. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things, it's a cause for concern. I'm just trying to give you the latest updates on all that. Some of these games I haven't looked at as much this week because, of course, well, I do have, a lot of the teams here off. We have outdoor events Saturday. It's to be nice here on Stark for, outdoor events, Halloween festivities, since Halloween's next Friday. Some of the Halloween events are this weekend. Just stay safe, obviously, and, a little bit cool at night. So make sure you have that light jacket there, that windbreaker, something like that, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them. Let's see if there are any questions or comments from any of the viewers at home here. Again, just trying to give you guys the very latest on things. It's all about protecting you, your friends, and your family. Just trying to take the comments real quick. Let me go ahead and show here just the overall pattern down there. Some of it's going to get cut off a little, but just kind of watching here. Can't really see the overall wind field, but things kind of, we have a center that reforms closer to the center of the convection. Well, if that's further east, then that kind of ends up maybe pushing things a little east with the track, possibly. But the worst thing is it actually organizes so quicker, and that allows for rapid intensification to take hold. So that could end up happening. And I'm kind of trying to refer to Stephen's comment there, and then I just appreciate everybody tuning in here and trusting me to give you guys the very latest on what's going on, obviously. Trying to keep you guys informed here. Trying to keep you guys up to date on the meteorological pattern here. There's some severe warnings there in Oklahoma right now. Still to track. Middle of the night, 12 a.m. Central Time. If you're watching live, we have a new thunderstorm warning that clips Norman there. Ping Pong, ball size hail, southern Norman there. 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts. They're under that alert. It may go more toward Noble, Oklahoma with that threat. But yeah, active night out there in toward the state of Oklahoma. So that's the storyline there. Some lightning there west of Dallas. Getting, toward that metroplex there. We're watching that for sure as that comes on in there toward Tarrant and Dallas counties. So that's kind of the storyline there. I think I pretty much covered everything I need to here tonight. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate everybody trusting me here in the Word of Weather Center. I know you can watch on Facebook. You can watch on Twitter, /X, YouTube, Twitch, sfclutter.com, all the different sources there, including that interactive radar. So make sure you're taking advantage of all that. Again, just trying to keep you guys up to date on everything here in the overall meteorological pattern. Stay safe, stay informed. Again, we are watching this. I know this doesn't see hardly anything as I'm wrapping it up. So let me just go ahead and get back down here and put the infrared back on and put on some of the Hurricane Center information. Oh, that's too much there. You can kind of see here some of the icons as we get some of these updated now. It's a little weaker on some of that. Well, that'd be good in terms of the wind, but it would, not help in terms of the rain necessarily that much, if any. So that's going to be a big problem down there as we're looking toward Jamaica. Some very, high-level concerns in toward that area with that flooding threat. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. Stay safe.